you need the Word. And today, I am actually beginning a new series, and it's something that God spoke for me to begin in this season. And it's simply entitled The Plagues of Egypt. And with each of the plagues that hit Egypt, there is a natural and there is a spiritual correspondence that relates to us in this modern time, in this day and age. And so far, I've counted 13 plagues of Egypt. Now, I know you said, well, it's only 10. Well, there was only 10 with Moses and the rod and between him and Pharaoh, but there was some other stuff happened both before and after the children of Israel were in Egypt. And I saw very clearly how these things that happened in Egypt still plague us today. And today we're going to deal with plague 1 of the plagues of Egypt, simply called bumps over blessings. Bumps over blessings. There was a gang of thieves, and they broke into a jewelry store, but they didn't steal anything when they broke in. Instead, they switched the price tags, and they put the cheap price tags on the expensive stuff, and they put the expensive price tags on the cheap stuff. And when customers came in, they didn't know the difference. Because if you look at costume jewelry, you can't really tell how much it's worth. It takes a jeweler with a loupe looking at it who really knows what they're doing, who can run some tests to find out whether something is real or fake. I've got on a jade wedding ring, and I bought this in China. But it's hard to tell real jade from glass. And I had to look up and say, how do I tell whether this is real jade or not? They got some tests that you run through. You can tap on it and see if it rings. You can drop it to see if it breaks. I said, well, if it breaks, it's busted. So it's really hard to tell if you're not a real expert whether it's real jade or whether it's jade. So the people who went in, they didn't know the cheap stuff from the expensive stuff. But this is the way it's often in life. The price tags has been switched by the world. And the things that we think are valuable in the long haul ain't worth a quarter. And the things that we put so little value on, those are the real treasures. But it takes some spiritual understanding just to even see and to even understand that. Do you know most folk don't put much value on accepting Jesus? But if you gave them $100,000, oh, that's worth a whole lot. Money is transient and it is temporary, but we put so much time, we put so much focus, we put so much of our life into something that's going to fade and we cannot take with us. The thieves have switched the price tags. A survey asked mothers to keep track of how many times they told their children something negative versus how many times they told their children something positive. Don't do that. Don't sit there. Clean that up. How many times they told the children something negative versus something positive? And when the mothers actually tallied it up, they found out they were telling 10 times more negative than positive. Recently, there was a city school that actually did a survey, and they found that 75% of teachers' words direct to students were negative. But they found that it took 4 positive statements to overcome the one negative. This is true not just with children, it's true with adults. Somebody tell you something negative, it takes a whole lot to overcome that. So today's plague of bumps over bruises, I'm going to open something up to you just dealing with that in terms of the plagues of Egypt. Now, Jacob brought one of the first curses to Egypt. Let me refresh your memory on who exactly Jacob was, just in case you haven't been to church ever. Because if you've been to church, you've heard of Jacob, but some maybe not. Maybe some of you, this is your first time coming to church. Well, Anyway, the three patriarchs of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob basically was Abraham's son. And some of you say, I don't know who Abraham is. Sometimes you can't just assume everybody knows biblical history. But these were the old original patriarchs of the Bible. And this was the one whom God promised that I would spread your seed throughout all the earth. You would have descendants more numerous than the stars in the sky. So this was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jacob is the one that I want to focus on today. Jacob was the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham. But if you know the story, Jacob deceived his brother Esau and stole his birthright. When he did that, Esau got mad. Esau was going to kill him. Jacob then fled to his uncle Laban's. He worked for Uncle Laban for 20 years. Uncle Laban gave him 2 of his daughters as wives and then 2 of the handmaidens he eventually had as concubines. And after 20 years, Jacob then left Laban. He had all this stuff. He went to Esau, his brother, because his brother was going to kill him. He brought him a whole lot of gifts to appease him so he wouldn't kill him. He had 12 sons who originally became kind of the 12 tribes of Israel. One of the sons, the youngest one, Joseph, his brothers got jealous of, threw him in the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites, who took him into Egypt. Eventually, he got to be a counselor to Pharaoh, became the second most powerful person in Egypt because he interpreted Pharaoh's dream that there would be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. So in the midst of the 7 years of famine, nobody around had any food, and then Jacob had his sons go into Egypt to get food, and they didn't know that the child that they had sold into slavery was now second on the throne of Egypt, and they didn't recognize him. So it went through all this stories. It's in Genesis, one of the most powerful and heart-wrenching stories in the Bible. But anyway, after all of this, it revealed and they understood that it was Joseph, their brother, who was on the palace ruling over Egypt. And they went back to tell their father Jacob that Joseph was not dead, he was still alive. And here, when Jacob went to Egypt, and Joseph brought him before Pharaoh, and it is here that one of the curses of Egypt came about, when Jacob spoke unto Pharaoh, and when he told him, in Genesis 47:7, and Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of my years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out before Pharaoh. So I want to talk to you about this curse that's still on so many of our lives today of bumps over blessings. Now, imagine you get a chance to go before the most powerful man in the land, and Egypt at the time was the most powerful nation in the world. And the man asks you, the king, and it's way beyond the president of the United States, because Pharaoh had absolute power, and he had absolute authority over life or death. See, that was one of the dreams that Joseph interpreted with the baker and the wine barrel, the cupbearer. He said, one of them, he said, Pharaoh going to bring you up and restore you. The other one, he going to chop your head off. He didn't have the power just to fire you. He had the power to chop your head off. So they had absolute power over life and death. And so here, in the wealthiest and the most mighty nation on the face of the earth, here Jacob gets a chance to stand before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks him a simple question. How old are you? Simple, basic. You know, sometimes, have you ever asked somebody how you doing, and all of a sudden they pour out all this stuff? You know, have you ever asked somebody that just come out with all this stuff? He asked Jacob a very simple question. How old are you? Jacob answers and he says, I'm 130. But, and see, it's always the but that mess folk up. I'm 130, but My days have been few and evil, and I have not lived as long as my fathers. These were the words that Jacob spoke unto Pharaoh. And far too often with us in our lives, we speak of and we focus on our bumps over our blessings. Now let me tell you how much Jacob had been blessed. First of all, he was 130. That's the first thing about it. It's like somebody saying, I'm 90, but I'm not gonna live as long as my mama did, who was 100. I'm only 90. I am only 130. My days have been few. Compared to who? And I have not lived as long as my fathers. Abraham lived to 175. His son Isaac lived 5 years longer than Abraham. He lived to 180. Jacob, however, only lived to 147. He died 17 years after. He died 33 years younger than his daddy. He spoke it. See, some of us are in this mess because of the power of our words. He spoke it. That's why I'm speaking. I'm going to live to 116. I don't care how I'm feeling. When you speak it, your cells in your body hear your declaration. When you speak life, you get life. When you speak death, you get death. That's why I had several people ask me this morning, "Hey, I'm doing excellent. I'm really feeling good." Sometimes I'll stand up here and just holler how good I'm feeling. Your body hears how you're feeling. And sometimes when the world or people ask you how you're doing, they ask you, "How old are you?" "Child, I'm just barely making it. I'm just barely hanging on. I done had a hard time." We focus on our bumps over our blessings. And we have so many blessings. And here God had spoken to Jacob directly. "I'm going to be with you. Your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. I'm going to bless you." And see, he blessed Jacob tremendously. Now, when Jacob did his brother wrong, and he had to flee to his uncle Laban, he saw his uncle Laban's daughter, Rachel, and he really liked this one. This woman was beautiful. And he made a deal with Laban to work for 7 years for Rachel, and then when he woke up the next morning after the wedding night, he had been switched out with Leah, who wasn't as pretty as Rachel, and he got all mad about that. Went back, and the daddy said, "I had to give you the oldest before I can give you the youngest. You had to get the old woman before you can get the young one. And you had to get the one that wasn't as pretty before you can get the pretty one." So he had to work another 7 years for Rachel, but he got both of them. And he didn't just get Rachel and Leah. He got the 2 handmaidens also as a minimum. You ought to read in there how when he had 4 women. And all of these women were vying for his attention at night. They were even paying some of the other women to be with him at night. Now, see, some men, they fussing about they don't have but one woman, and that woman ain't have sin about him. He had 4 women minimum, because sometimes some of the concubines they had not even listed. That's why I said Abraham, if you look through Abraham, it said Abraham gave gifts to the children of his concubines. They didn't even list them. So he had a minimum of 4 women who was vying for his attention every night. What some men would consider to be just paradise. Jacob told me, "My day just been evil. My day I ain't got but 4 women. My day just been evil." See, some of this stuff is that's why how you view and speak in life can determine your whole vibration of you sometimes blind yourself to the blessings of God. Then when Jacob went to meet his brother Esau, he sent ahead some gifts to appease Esau because he was afraid Esau was going to be mad at him, going to try to kill him. So when you look at the list of the animals that Jacob sent ahead to appease Esau, it was like 200 cows and 300 sheep and all that. I looked up and added up the amount of dollars it would be worth in today's dollars. He sent ahead as a gift. Now, you know, if he was giving a gift, this wasn't all his stuff. It was just a piece of his stuff. Because God had so blessed Jacob while he worked for Laban, he had multiplied his flocks. And so he left Laban not just with 4 women, he left with 4 women, a bunch of children, and a whole bunch of stuff. See, money in that day was valued in your cattle and your livestock. That's what you didn't have banks over there. Your sheep and your oxen and your donkeys, all that was your money. So he sent ahead to give as his brother a peace offering, $650,000 worth of stuff. That's how much it would be worth in today's equivalent. He basically sent $1 million almost to his brother. And that was just part of what he had. So this man had a minimum of 4 women. He had 12 children, minimum. And he had $650,000 just to give away to his brother. So he had plenty money. He had plenty children. He had plenty women. Most men would consider that pretty reasonable. But Jacob looked at the most powerful man in the land. When he asked him, how old was he? I only had these few years of 130 years, and my life has just been evil. He was valuing his bumps over his blessings. How many of us do that? I mean, God has just given us so much, and yet we focus on. Now, first of all, people, let me explain something to you. You will have bumps. Some of you are going to have some mountains. You're going to have some bumps. Because, see, it's no question that Jacob didn't have bumps. He had bumps when he had to run away from his brother Esau, but he did do his brother wrong. See, that's the part we don't talk about. He didn't mention that to Pharaoh. See, he said, my life has just been evil. He didn't mention I did evil. That's why stuff happened to me. He didn't mention that to Pharaoh. He just said my life's been evil. He didn't say that he went through he didn't mention that Laban tricked him because he had tricked his brother. He didn't mention that seed was just reaping what he had already sown. He didn't mention that to Pharaoh. See, a lot of times when we're going through this stuff, we don't mention what we may have done to cause some of this stuff to happen. We just talk about the bumps. Lord, I just went through this stuff. Ooh, I don't know what happened. It happened. And see, so here we have Jacob, who has gone through some bumps. See, the woman who he loved, those 14 years after she had the 2 children, she died after Benjamin, the youngest. And this was the woman he loved. So he lost one of his 4 women. Then Joseph had been taken away and sold, but they brought back his coat full of blood, and they told Daddy that he had been killed by wild animals. So he had lost his spouse, he had lost a wife, and he had lost a child. Those are tough bumps. Death of a spouse is the number one psychological trauma that psychologists say that you can go through. And that's probably true when you really love your spouse. Now, some folks be done kill their spouse. So that's true when you really love the spouse. So death of a spouse is the number one psychological thing that psychologists is the number one trauma. Death of a child is the number 3 trauma. What's number 2? Divorce is number 2. So those are the 3 top traumas, and all of them deal with loss of relationship in one form or another. So here, Jacob had gone through number 1, and he had gone through number 3. So he had gone through some real bumps in life. But my mama has gone through them same bumps. My mama has lost her one and only husband 20 years ago. My mama has lost one of her 6 children. Jacob had 12. He had twice as many as my mama did. I went out to Pastor Salter's new church yesterday, and my mother went with me. And Pastor Salter spent an hour just showing us around. And my mother was just as joyous, and we walked all over that place. She was walking just a bouncing. She doesn't focus on the bumps. She's 86 years old. We walked for over an hour. She didn't complain about anything hurting. She kept up with us. As a matter of fact, in some cases, she was in front of us. We went out of the back door. It had just been raining, so there was a puddle of water. And Pastor Saul said, Miss Bronner, you can stay in here because you got to hop over this water. Mama, I can hop over there. She went. She jumped right over there. She does not focus on bumps. If you call and talk to my mother, it won't take her long before she'll begin to talk about, I've got 4 sons in the ministry. Oh, it does me so much good every Sunday. I can see 4 of my sons in the ministry, and one of them is a president. She could say, I lost one of my child. I lost one of my children. He's no longer in the earth, and I just can't make it. You see, everybody, or I lost my husband. That's not what she said. She said, I had the best husband in the world. The man was so unique. The man was a genius. The man taught all of it. She talks about her blessings over her bumps. We're going to all have bumps. But when you focus on them bumps, your world is going to be like Jacob's, and it'll cut your life short. He said, I don't have as many years as my daddy, and sure enough, he didn't. He lost 33 years, and I believe he lost 33 years because of the words of his mouth. If he'd have spoken, I'm going to live longer than my daddy, all my life, God has blessed me with all of this stuff. You're always going to have bumps. It is absolutely unavoidable in life. As a matter of fact, it is necessary in life to help you appreciate the blessings. You're going to have bumps, but when you put your bumps over blessings, it becomes a curse. And out of the words of our mouths, if you go and read the book of James, it talks about how difficult it is to master and to control the tongue. And there's life and death in the tongue. And you can speak life and death into your world by whether you focus on your bumps or your blessings. We all have them. But it is natural for us to gravitate to the negative. See, Elijah preached in his last message. He's doing a series called Abiding in God. Oh, it was powerful. And then see, Elijah, in his last message, he talked about how it is to abide in God. And he went through scripture after scripture. It was just so powerful. And then he said he was watching this crazy movie. And he said that in this crazy movie called Ice Sharks, it was a sharks that were living in the ice. They had mutated. They were busting up through the ice and eating folk. And there was this weather station out there in the ice, and the sharks had torn, and the weather station was floating out, and they had to drop an anchor to keep the weather station from floating out in the ocean where the sharks going to eat them up. And see, Elijah used that to show how you sometimes have to anchor yourself in God to keep you from floating away. And I talked to C. Elijah yesterday, and C. Elijah was in the gym, and he said, what you do? I said, well, to tell you the truth, I just got through watching Ice Sharks. So now, I did not go to read all of the powerful scripture about abiding. He just mentioned it one time. He said this crazy movie called Ice Sharks. So I avoided all of the great scripture that C. Elijah talked about, all of the abiding in God, all of that, and went to watch this crazy movie. See, sometimes we do this crazy, we got all this good stuff all around us. And we gravitate to the negative, crazy stuff in life. People, we put bumps over blessings. And it becomes a curse. And it was the first curse of Egypt. And Jacob, when he spoke it to Pharaoh, spoke like so many of us speak. You are not old. You're blessed, because what's the alternative? I'd be glad about my age. You never hear me talking about that's a curse because I'm old. First of all, I'm not old. That's a relative thing. I've got 52 years and 2 months to go. I am not old. So it depends on how you look at this thing, and it depends on how you view this thing as a bump or how you view it as a blessing. And I want us to gear our minds so that we're not cursed with that plague that so many of us are cursed with, that we will look at our bumps and ignore all of the blessings that God has brought to us. Milkshake, the instrumentalist who played for us this morning, his first song was by Louis Armstrong. And it was through the eyes of Louis, who penned perhaps his most famous song, What a Wonderful World. Don't you think Louis had some bumps as a black man growing up back then? Satchmo had tons of bumps. But what he chose to do was see all of the beauty in the world. What a wonderful world. And I tell you and I declare that to you. You got a wonderful world. Yeah, you got some bumps. The earth, standing in the midst of it, you can see mountains and valleys. But when you move out into space, the earth's surface is as smooth as a ball bearing, because the diameter of the earth compared to its 25,000 miles through the earth, but yet the highest mountain peak is only about 5 miles. There's no ball bearing that man can make that is as smooth as the earth is. But it feels rough to us when you're going up and down the mountains. From God's perspective, it's smooth. From our perspective, it's rough. And we focus on the bumps and not on the blessings. You are a blessed people. You're blessed beyond measure. You got blessings that you ain't even recognized yet. You are so blessed. And when someone asks you how you are doing, you need to say, I'm doing excellent, I am blessed. You need to talk about all of the things that are going right in your world, not the stuff that you think is going wrong. And where your focus is, where your words are, your situations will start to line up with. It's just a power with that. And even in your relationship, when some of you say, my relationship, it starts, you're speaking death to the thing. You're saying it's just evil. It's not evil. Even the worst of relationships got some good stuff in it. But it becomes a matter of what you focus on. And when you focus on the negative, you magnify the negative. And when a person hears you talk about the negative all the time, they get more and more negative. It takes at least 4 positives to overcome 1 negative. We have got to put our blessings over our bumps, because it's just a blessing to even be able to get over the bump. Do you understand? It's a blessing to be able to get over the bump. And when we understand this, it changes our world, and it moves us from a cursed mentality to a blessed mentality. I thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word. You can go to brothersoftheword.com, and you can hear the entire series of the plagues of Egypt, in particular today's message, Bumps Over Blessings, absolutely free at brothersoftheword.com. Thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. From Brothers of